Hello and welcome to the Word Podcast. Basically, what the Word Podcast is the podcast where I surround myself with people who know what they're talking about, so that maybe one day I will too. In other words, but this is very much my bliss too. Uh, that's one of the things I love the most is kind of like when we were talking earlier. Um, Summer and I were talking about this idea of like not just following your bliss toward like, indulging in every human desire, um, and having kind of like a balance there. But like the idea that, like when I started this podcast, I didn't like hang out with a whole lot of people, but I was very interested in books, writing, and then I like watched some videos of people talking about books on YouTube. And Philip, you were one of them, and I've talked to you about this as well, where that kind of like seeing like nine people on a screen talking about, I was like, well, I could give a shit about this, like that feels like following my bliss because like I said, like I like people, but I like talking about things that I'm interested in. So it kind of felt like I was like an introvert, but it was like, no, you just aren't talking about the right things to the right people who actually, care about those things. So yeah, I really love that and how we've all kind of gotten here through following our bliss. Um the next thing I do want to talk about is myth as map. Now, Summer, this is a point you brought up, and would you mind elaborating on it for me?
Sure. So, you know, um, Joseph Campbell talks a lot about myths as being the tools for living, right? It's like a orientation point. It's a map. It's not meant to be read as the literal news or the newspaper. It is a map. It is an orientation tool. And this, I think, is one of the most interesting things about the conversation with Bill Moyers, who's, a man of faith, was when they would get into these kinds of nuances, Campbell could be a little, as much as he reveres world religions and stories, he can also be quite critical of them. And I think this is one point where he was a little critical of what um, all major religions have done and making things a little maybe too literal. So this idea that we can take what happens to gods and heroes and apply them to our own lives. We are our own myth makers. We are, the Christ within, God is us, all of these ideas that brought what used to be so far from us, isn't that, oh, that's the in the heavens, that's the life of the gods. No, we can bring it practically down to the earth, to the human plane, and live by those myths and find, validation, company, cautionary tales, entertainment, whatever it is, we can pull. We're not alone. So when we're in our own dark night of the soul, well, you can turn to, a myth, a book, a story, whatever it is. It's essentially storytelling, that can help us find our way through that point. But again, it's orientation. It's not, this happened to Inanna in the Sumerian culture. And so this, by golly, is what's going to happen to me. It's no, it's what can I take from Inanna's myth and apply to my own life to either give me comfort, joy, whatever it is. An orientation point is how I see it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I know. I mean, Joseph Campbell grew up a Roman Catholic, and he fell out of a conventional understanding of his faith, or he worked his way toward a different understanding. I think he was still very spiritual in ways,
Mhm.
but that he did not have a literal interpretation of, let's say, the biblical stories. He had a more mythological interpretation.
Right.
And at that time in my life, 17 years old, when I was watching that series with Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell, it really spoke to me because I was raised in a Protestant house. In fact, my father was a minister, my grandfather was a minister, my great grandfather was a minister.
Wow.
So yeah, I was in a line of ministers, and I thought for a while as a younger teen that I probably would follow in their footsteps. But I was at a point in my life too where I was starting to not believe literally in the faith that I was raised in. And for me, Joseph Campbell introduced a way that I could still be spiritual. Like I didn't feel the need to reject my faith ever because he gave me a new way to understand it, that I could engage with it and on a more metaphorical or mythological, however you want to say that. And to me, that's not an insult at all if you call something a myth. I think I love myths, and I think that we need myths, and they speak to our inner selves in ways that are profound. And there's a reason they're handed on from generation to generation, and that they're our collective dream, if you will. So we need them to work out our place in the universe. And Campbell gave me a way to appreciate the faith that I was raised in, such that I did not feel the need to leave it behind entirely or reject it, that I could appreciate it in a new way. And that is something that I think was very helpful for me at the time. So rather than having a complete crisis of faith, I just felt like I gained a new understanding, a deeper understanding and appreciation for some of the things that I was raised in, and I could still value the things that I believed, the parts that I thought were beautiful, so yeah, it was really helpful for me actually to see this man talk about these stories in a way where I felt they came alive again for me, where I was on the verge of feeling like I don't believe these stories. I can't believe them literally anymore. But he brought them back to life for me in a way that I think was profoundly important for me at that age.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think that like there's such a by the way, Philip, you'd be a killer youth pastor, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Just saying. If you ever want to go back to it. But I like I have a tendency to like shit on my past religion. My upbringing, sorry. And like I have a tendency also to like, focus on the negative aspects of it. And there are plenty of positive ones too. But like um I'm wondering because Philip, you're just touching on that a little bit. And I thought that was so cool that you had this like transmutation process where you just had this deeper understanding instead through Joseph Campbell. I like try to do that and then like it's like the trauma comes up and it's like yeah but like remember they took I think of like my little kid mind and them be and it being like oh yeah everything's wonderful and blissful and then being like no actually things are like this that's every time man so it's like do do you think I want to ask both of you do you think there is a way to like have that, kind of have that the roots of hell, the branches reaching up to heaven, the roots of hell, that Jungian idea to like integrate that thing. What is that that my trauma bubbles up and I'm like, it's hard for me to be like, yeah, this is my new understanding of this myth, and I think it's beautiful, but also like all of this, and maybe I would rather it all just die,
Mm.
the specific religion.
That's a tough one. I
Yeah.
think it's not necessarily easy, and I do know what you mean by trauma. And I sometimes have a hard time. I don't attend many services on a regular basis. I don't participate in organized religion any longer. And when I do, often it raises the trauma for me too. It's like, oh, there are certain things that can be said, certain interpretations, let's say,
Right.
of scripture that I disagree with, and I feel personally have done a lot of harm in the world. But I also recognize that those same people who I disagree with so strongly, many of them are relatives and friends, when it comes to my interpretation of those passages, those same people can be incredibly loving. Their faith inspires them to do some really beautiful things as well. And I need to recognize that part as well. I can't just say, oh, you guys are horrible and terrible and your interpretation is wrong. and therefore I'm not going to be associate with you at all. So it's hard, but I try to see that the bigger picture of the people and how their faith and their interpretation of it. There are aspects of it that I strongly disagree with. I think may even be harmful to people because I remember being terrified as a small child of hell and living in just daily terror that I was going to go to hell, because I didn't have strong enough belief or something like that, or having nightmares about the second coming, the apocalypse happened, my whole family was gone and I was alone, in the house, and because I wasn't good enough, I have that's not a healthy experience, I don't think. So yeah, there are aspects of that belief that I do reject, but at the same time, I want to acknowledge that it's not just all bad, that there are things that inspire the people who believe in those things to do good things in the world as well. But yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy to stay in dialogue with people who you disagree with about fundamental aspects of interpretation when it comes to your faith. But maybe it's better that we try sometimes.
Mm.
And I try to bring with a sense of humility my own respect for, even though I look at these stories very differently today. I don't look at, let's say the account of Genesis. I don't believe that the world was created in 7 days. But I think there are big T truths that you can find in those very old stories that are actually quite beautiful and interesting and important to think about. So yeah, if somebody's willing to engage with me, and I'm willing to give it a try too. But it's not easy. It's really not. So I certainly know where you're coming from, John. Yeah. Maybe Summer has a better
Yeah.
answer. Yeah.
Well, no, I'll just add that, Joseph Campbell is quick to say we've outgrown. I mean, it's almost like organized religion are the myths we can't let go of. Like why do we just keep on, coming back to these myths? And it's because they do serve a function, right? They serve this kind of collective identity. They fill in the gaps of, what we understood were outside of our scientific understanding. They also sociologically help us stay in line, right? It's like Santa Claus. It's, get in line, kid. I don't want to have to tell you all year long. So let's keep the Santa Claus thing going, and then you'll be nice and not naughty. So that, of course, is oversimplifying religion a good bit, but they're outdated. And that's what Joseph Campbell put the responsibility on prophets and writers and creative thinkers, is the myths of today. So they certainly serve a function. And I dare say that, would we have as many creative thinkers without organized religion? And I would say probably not. It gives some individuals something to expand upon or reject. But either way, there's a lot of creative energy that comes from that. Um, so I think they do serve a purpose, and they might serve the purpose of helping us find the new myth and the new myths to live by, which may in fact be the myth of the modern world and organized religion. And we know we do have to get beyond those things and work in conjunction with other humans. So it does, I think, call us to a higher evolutionary kind of standard to be able to create new myths alongside people who take old myths and live them literally. There's an opportunity there. So yes, I mean, I share, a lot of some of the sentiments that you've said, and I was raised in the same way. But I think there's still so much beauty in what it does to one's brain, even if it appears, even if it was kind of traumatic in its upbringing. And, John, I know specifically with you, like I think about, who would you be as a writer? Who would your characters be without Mormonism? So, there's treasure in it. I also think it organized religion can be the tripping that leads us to the treasure. It can be the thing that starts to feel so wrong that we go on our own journey. So I think it serves a huge purpose as much as it confounds us sometimes and is used in as a weapon in a lot of ways. But it always strikes me as funny, is why did we pick the certain books in the Bible to take so literally and not, I used to have a copy of the Gnostic Gospels and I hid it under my mattress. Like that was the kind of kid I was. And but I thought, like, why do we take Genesis literally, but not some other, pick your fantasy novel? And why don't we take Lord of the Rings to be a literal, it's just an odd sort of uh human capacity to be like, this is truth with a capital T, and these things are entertainment reading. It's humans being human. We're short-sighted, and I think in some ways religion shows both our metaphysical capacity, which is huge, but also our limitations. So I kind of take it as, oh, it's so sweet. Isn't organized religion sweet? If the humans, like, isn't it sweet how we tried to fill in the blanks and create this order out of what felt really chaotic? And all it shows is that archetypal need for connection and ritual and all of those things. And organized religion fills that for a lot of people. So I think it certainly has its merit. No matter what beliefs we ascribe to, it gives us a benchmark to choose our own truth. And I think that is really, really powerful creatively for people.
Hmm.
Yeah, I really like what you just said, and I feel like that's gonna change the way I look at it forever, which is uh oh, isn't it sweet? Like,
Right.
like, isn't it? And that makes me feel awful, too, because of like every time I'm like, wow, really, of course, you're, making this thing literal that doesn't need to be or whatever. But yeah, it's that idea of like, well, of course you are, like, and of course I am too in this other way that is also causing like all its own problems. There's this there's this novel, and I haven't read it, but I've just heard about it. It's called The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just my name with an en on the end of both.
Right.
Huh.
You're so
Anyway,
close, John. You're so close to
so
writing that
much.
book.
Just needed one more but the idea is just that, like, generational corrections, like the parents make all of these mistakes, and then the kids underneath them are like, okay, and I'm gonna fix it in this way, and then it causes all these other problems, and like that, just that idea, which is like, he mythologized that concept where it doesn't really matter. Oh, you sweet little things, of course you're gonna cause all kinds of trauma as you try to make sense of this shit. So yeah, anyway, I
Mhm.
really appreciated that. I want to talk about specifically archetype, and Summer's actually editing my book, so she has an inside. Yeah, she knows that when you said that about what would my characters be without being raised, I was like, oh shit, and she knows, like because it's all over it. But no, that's a cool way to think about it. But so Summer, you're an editor, and Philip, you're a writer, and you're both academics. You both taught literature, uh,
Mhm.
right, Philip?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so yeah, I would like both of your professional uh, um, opinions and views on archetype, and if how they function in our daily lives with the people around us, and in our fiction.
In fiction, it's something that fantasy particularly revels in, the archetypes that I think there's a tendency today to prize originality and to look for something that's new and different. But the truth is, I think that to a large degree, our storytelling needs to engage with the old patterns, at least some. And there's a certain percentage. If you do something entirely different from what's come before, then people are not going to know what you're doing. I mean, there has to be some touchstones for them in order to understand, okay, this is this kind of story, or this is what's going. Even if you're being really subversive with it or whatever, there has to be some recognition, I think, because we're not telling stories in isolation. I mean, we don't have myths in the same way that people used to as collective property. But we still, I think fantasy particularly is a genre where we almost imitate those myths and those archetypes. We're repurposing them a bit. And it is possible to be more subversive with them, but we're still engaging with these old patterns and these characters and so on. Um, so I think that to some degree, no matter how original you're trying to be, you need to engage with this. Um, on the other hand, you have to keep it fresh, and interesting. If you're just recycling, then rather than an archetype, it'll appear like a cliche. So I mean, we all recognize certain patterns and of storytelling and certain characters. We all see the mentor figure. We all know that Merlin and Obi-Wan are the same person. So is Gandalf, and so is Dumbledore, and so on and so on. You can keep naming the old mentor figure who's there to give the protagonist a kick in the pants to get them going out of their comfortable womb-like space, so they are forced out onto their adventure. And at some point, that mentor figure often needs to get out of the way, and that often happens by dying, so that the protagonist grows up and all that. Why do we keep telling this story again and again? Why do we keep doing this? And why do we keep even as we keep retelling it, we need to keep it fresh in ways that still speak to people. And I think it's fascinating, actually. And I think the answer is that these things speak to our our psyches, our needs, the flow of our lives. I mean, growing up is something that people do, and we used to have much more clear. Something Campbell talks about a lot, actually, is we used to have much more clear markers of this is the point where you become an adult. This is where you make this
Right.
transition between childhood and adult. There's a ritual, and often a very like literally scarring ritual, but physically, but also mentally, spiritually. That's a ritual that changes you, transforms you, and you are marked as a changed person, as someone who is now an adult. We don't really have that. It's very watered down. If you are a person of faith and you participate in an organized religion, maybe you have a baptism or a confirmation or whatever it might be but it's pretty watered down, honestly. So does that mean we don't need stories that address a protagonist who is, coming of age and growing up? And maybe we need it even more, even because we don't have these clear markers in our lives any longer. When are you an adult in modern society, right? Is it when you're 18, when you can vote? Is it when you can, in the United States, is it when you can drink alcohol when you're 21? Or is it, I don't know. There are lots of different, things that none of them are very decisive, though, really, I feel like,
It's when you write your first fantasy novel during a pandemic.
that's right. There it is. There it is. So I think we need the stories in order to participate in the journey that the character goes on, where at the end of the journey, you know, at the end of The Hobbit, Bilbo has grown up. He's left that womb-like space of the Shire. He's gone out into the world. He's gone through, he was in the belly of the whale when he was under the mountain with Gollum, and and he came back a transformed person, someone who was able to give something back to his world, and in a significant way. So where he, in fact, he's never a physically imposing figure or anything like that, but he's grown up morally. The moment when he withholds the Arkenstone from his friends, right, from the dwarves, from Thorin, and he hands it over to, sorry, these are spoilers for The Hobbit, everybody. Hands it over to the elves and the humans outside, to Bard and the rest, and as a moral decision. That's where we see just how much Bilbo has grown. during his journey. Yeah, there are other, when he uses Sting, effectively against the spiders, and he defends his friends, and he saves them from captivity, and these are all these markers along the way where we're seeing him grow and evolve. But it's when he makes that moral decision that we realize, Bilbo has really become, and Gandalf recognized it. He even comments on how, "Oh my, Bilbo, you certainly have grown here." So I think that we need that in order to feel a sense of ourselves and where we fit in the world, and giving us a story that confers that sense of meaning, that sense of transition, is still an important function. So we still need these archetypes, in my opinion. And we keep them fresh by giving little wrinkles on them, and little different iterations for every time, every generation. But seems to me that these archetypes connect us to the past, because we still have these deep inner needs. We still have to wrestle with mortality. We still have to wrestle with growing up. We still have to wrestle with the same fundamental things that people have been wrestling with since time immemorial. So I think that the archetypes still serve a very important function.
Yeah, I can't really add much to that. I do think they, on a practical kind of daily level, I think archetypes are the things that allow humans to have the right view of ourselves. So they're a good reminder that, when you're reading a story and you have the trickster or the mentor, it reminds you that yes, that might appear in your own life. You might have the individual who kind of plays that role, but the larger reminder is that you have that yourself. We contain the archetypes. So I think one of the most powerful things about playing with them and writing or reading them is that reminder that they're all parts of us. They all have validity. The second you try to push one away, that's when you're going to suddenly have some kind of, crisis of the soul or something, because you have said, oh no, that's not me, whatever that archetype is. So I think the reason writing and reading is so powerful is that interplay with archetypes. And you close the book, and even if it's on a very, subconscious level, it forces you to think about your own life in that same way and have that critical eye that puts you in that space between that Campbell talks about a lot. It gives you that kind of that aesthetic arrest. Is that what James Joyce would call it? It's that moment of like, ooh, you get those chills, and you see your life as a work of art. And what's the beauty in that? Well, then suddenly you can find meaning in the hell that befalls you, whatever it is. You're not like, oh God, the sky is falling. You think, oh, this is what I need now. I know I'm going to survive it because I can lean on, whatever characters that have, lulled me in the past. So I think it strengthens the human condition a little bit to have these archetypes. And I think what is so fascinating about them is that they're not consciously, I mean, I'm sure people do sit down with like a beat sheet and an archetype sheet and think, oh, now I need to meet the mentor. But where did they come from at first? That's always the thing that just gives me chills to think about. And that's where Carl Jung comes in. This idea that the archetypes are universal, whether they come from myth or dream, it's the same source. Like, what the heck? That's crazy to me. It's the same source. So it also allows us to think very critically about our dreams. And I don't, you can go really deep into that kind of. I used to go to a Jungian dream analyst, and it was so incredibly fascinating. But to start to understand that we have all of these archetypes, they are served up to us nightly. It's your own personal myth making. Every morning we have the opportunity to sit there and think about the archetypes in our dreams and the journey we're on. And it's unbelievable to me that humans have to just lay in this bed and we rest and our faculties are frozen for 9 hours. I mean, it's just crazy to me. And this is where just what lights me up in terms of how fascinating it is to be a human, that the majority or a good portion of every day is dedicated to archetypal playgrounds, and it's in your brain. And it's a product of some of these other things we've talked about, of your family of origin, your religion of origin. All of these things create the playground that we then participate in nightly if we're lucky and remember our dreams. But to me, that's kind of the power of the archetypes. Is yes, it makes for good storytelling, but it also makes for real good myth making and life making. Because if you really are willing to look at that interplay, you can learn a lot about yourself and you can find a lot of meaning in some dark moments.
Are you guys ever like paralyzed by this? Because I certainly am. I'll see the jokester, in my life, like
Uh,
whatever, and I'll be like, I'll judge them. I'll be like, oh, wow, you're being the Joker right now, aren't you? And then it paralyzes me though when I have that impulse to take on that role, and I like become aware of it, and I'm like, oh yeah, really, you're gonna fall for the archetypes. You
well, and that's
ever
and
experience
that's
that?
your shadow, John. Like if when you have that reaction to the jokester, what part of you said it's not okay to be a jokester?
Oh
That's
shit.
you applying that. So then when you are the jokester, your ego is kind of criticizing you for being that, but we're all the jokester. We're all the trickster. We're all every portion of it. So that's the integration, is befriending the jokester. Maybe even sitting down with the jokester and not telling jokes with the jokester. And that's kind of probably the beauty that lies when two jokesters get together. And the rule is you cannot make a joke.
Well, I'll kind of ruin them too sometimes. I will sabotage the jokester by making him aware that he's the jokester too. Like I'll be like, yeah, but I could see that you're being the jokester right now. And then they're like, "Oh, you know,
Right.
deflate a little bit." I don't know, you ever
Right.
have that, Philip, where you become aware of this thing and then it's just like for a minute. Like I feel like maybe later it pays off, the awareness
Mm.
of like I go through these archetypes on a daily basis. But like, do you ever have that kind of paralyzing factor of like I'm doing it?
Mostly, I find it empowering, actually.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Um, so, I mean, I have to play a role when I teach, and
Right.
look, there's a reason I wear tweed jackets. It's part of the uniform. So when students see me in that role, it helps me to perform it. If visually or however else, I can confirm, yes, I am the professor now. I am your mentor. I'm your teacher. And yeah, and lean into it. It's actually very helpful to perform and to be a good teacher. Because if they're convinced from day one, oh, this is the professor, obviously, look at his tweed jacket and his glasses, and um, I'm not kidding. It actually helps.
It
Yeah.
It
does,
really,
brilliant.
it's part of the deal. I mean, there's a reason why police wear uniforms. There's a reason why, a chef needs an apron on. You put the thing on and you become the thing.
Superman.
Yeah, that's right. It's heroes, superheroes have to wear, skin tight costumes because it's more heroic. Um, but yeah, it's just, I think we recognize, and it can be empowering when you recognize I'm doing this role, and leaning into that can actually help you do it even better, especially if there's a psychological thing going on when you convince other people, yes, you're this thing, you can use that. So I think it can be empowering. Yeah.
That's cool, and makes it feel like it's more of a choice. Like, oh, I could like shit on myself here, or this could be empowering. And that's what I love about these conversations. With my wife, I have It's called Podcast John.
Mm.
It's a different guy.
Mm.
Now listen, no, nope, everybody, nope, hold on. I am being an authentic person here, but like Philip said, I'm going to use Philip for validation. It's empowering to also take on the role of Podcast John. Anyway, but
Right.
when
Because you
I'm
can't be podcast John all the time.
no,
No. Heavens no.
I need a little bliss station where I can take a break from Podcast John. But when I am taking on that role out in the world, like it is an inquisitive role. It is a joyous role. It is a like I ask people questions. I am there is a different role that I play where I need to be heard. Like I
Mhm.
need you to ask me questions. And if you're not, then I'm going to be thinking all kinds of negative thoughts that are going to be make me and you both miserable. But when I am fucking podcast John, I am I am a delight. You know?
And that's part of who you are, John. You know, that that's a genuine part of who you are.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. It
Yeah.
is, yeah. Because it feels false sometimes, you know, like so no, that's cool. This is actually everybody, you can go home. Me and these two are just gonna talk and they're gonna help me with all of my trauma.
Oh.
Well, let's go to the next point here, which is ritual, which he had like a really metal one in I mean like
Oh.
heavy metal in The Power of Myth with no, it wasn't. Yeah. Okay, so ritual of cannibalism.
Mm.
6 boys have sex with one girl. God, sorry, everybody. Well, you already know if you're here. Last time the couple is on the sixth boy, the couple is killed and they're united, healing the separation from man from woman. The couple is then roasted and eaten, and then like right after that, Joseph Campbell does this amazing like crossover to Christianity about eating the body of Christ, and Jesus being the fruit of eternal life, the second tree, not the first, where he is the Jesus represents the coming back to the garden. Um, yeah, and the tree back into the garden is the second tree. Me and the Father are one. Um, and that whole idea of I'm the son of God, and that like everybody can realize that, not just the one person, and that kind of being the idea there. Now, this is an extreme version of ritual, but is there a loss of ritual? Is there a modern loss of ritual? Is it problematic? Can ritual go too far to where we're roasting people alive and eating them in an effort to get closer to God and self-realization?
So there's a lot in that. So yeah, rituals, are myths put into action. So I think when we read the myth literally, which Campbell cautions us against, I think we can get a little, off track with the rituals. I also think that, if we're looking at rituals of the past, it's hard to judge them. We don't know all of the people standing around as the sixth, male and the female were, roasted and eaten. Was it a transcendent experience for everyone else nearby? Probably so, because this was a myth put into action that they could physically participate with. So, you know, uh, who are we to say that it wasn't worth it if this is this transcendent experience that it most likely was for these people? Um, I think if there's any cautionary tale that Campbell gives us, it's that we are losing rituals. And I think that vacuum is where organized religion can easily step in, and it does. And as you mentioned, the body of Christ, and it is still very ritual based, especially certain religions. So I do think it fills that void, but yes, we're losing rituals. I even have trouble thinking what are the rituals these days on kind of a collective scale. Um, we could get into kind of, the internet and social media and what does that do for rituals and all of that. I'm think now a lot of our rituals are becoming more, when you get your first phone, when you do your first live stream. And I'm not going to judge that in the same way that I'm not going to judge roasting the virgins, because it's the myth, it's potentially the rituals of our time. And it only makes you sound old when you criticize those anyway. But I do think we're losing those. It's funny, just last week, my daughter got her ears pierced and she's 13 years old. And I'm trying to make this into the initiation moment, right? She just happens to I'm 13, I'm ready, let's do it. I'm trying to give the context so that it's accepted and understood. This is a rite of passage. This is the ritual into adulthood that Philip was just talking about. This is the demarcation that you're an adult. Did she care? No, she didn't care. I like to think that it, seeped in some way. But I don't know that it did. But yes, we do need rituals. It makes us feel a part of the collective. And when we feel disconnected, that is when bad things happen. I think I say bad things happen. Maybe that again is another judgment call, because sometimes when you feel disconnected, what do? You sit down and write so that you can connect with your characters. That's a noble endeavor. Same thing when people feel disconnected, they go to church on Sunday. They're with their church body. They get that experience of the divine, and they walk out a better human. So I don't judge rituals. Or I try not to. I try to withhold judgment because I don't know what purpose it serves for the individual. But if it makes them a more integrated, individuated person, go for it. But I do think we have to be very creative in finding our own rituals. And they're so small. And that's what I think can be a really practical takeaway is, find your ritual. What is it? Is it how you make your tea every night? Is it, how you pump yourself up in the mirror to be podcast John? Is it putting on your tweed jacket? What those are rituals, and they serve a hugely important purpose to connect us to other humans, to connect us to the life we want, to ease our anxieties. They're so important. So I try daily to find some kind of ritual, even if it's something no one else knows about or, anything, just finding whatever that little ritualistic moment is on a day-to-day basis. Then we feel more united and connected to the other, whatever that is. And then I'm hopefully less likely to be trying to connect in ways that maybe don't serve me as well. So maybe it's not the glass of wine at night or whatever. It's reading a book. It's something that makes me feel I'm connected to the source, whatever we want to call it, so that I don't, in my little limited human capacity, start trying to find it at a human level. So I think we all have to do that. And sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. I think younger generations, it's unfortunately being lost a little bit. But we're the adults, by golly, and we can help bring back some rituals for these youngins.
Yeah. You said a bunch of things I agree with, Summer, and one of them being it's better for us not to be judgmental of other people's rituals.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a tendency myself to be dismissive of modern rituals as being more trivial and less effective. So I'm trying to look at these in a new light. Like my daughter, my younger daughter, who's 17, just got her driver's license. And that's in American culture, that's a serious ritual. There's the lessons, you have certain steps you have to go through. You have to go through this harrowing test. at the DMV, where in our state, and it is a kind of ritual. It is a rite of passage because you now, upon getting this certification, this validation, this societal level validation that you are now allowed to do this activity that will make you more independent, that will give you further reach, that will change you into maybe that's in American culture, one of the most significant markers of being an adult is getting your driver's license. So there's one, that I think we can point to that has broad cultural significance, at least here. I don't think it's quite the same in a lot of other cultures where they're less dependent on cars than we are. But that's an example. I mean, they're around, and I also love what Summer was saying about we can create our own private rituals as well that confer meaning and significance. Like I make tea every morning and afternoon for my wife. It's just part of our ritual that we do every day, and it's something that we can then have the tea together and chat and it's part of our daily life, and it doesn't feel right when we don't do it, so that's another an example of what Summer was talking about when we talk about self-created small rituals, personal rituals. So I think we need them, and even to sometimes when, especially when life is hard and you've suffered a significant loss, you've gone through something terrible. It's the rituals that keep you going almost, right? If you didn't have the rituals, like, okay, doing my routine, I got my exercise routine, and no matter how terrible I'm feeling, once I start getting into those exercises, I feel better. I'm in my ritual. I'm doing my thing, and that equips me for the rest of the day, whatever it might be that I'm facing. So, yeah, I think that we need them, and in that sense, they're going to be around no matter how our culture may feel to us in the moment to be disengaged from ritual, because it is my instinct is to be more dismissive of modern ritual as being more superficial, as being. But I think we need them, so they're always going to be around, and they may be more profound than we realize. So.
Yeah, I do want to say too that like I have cultivated the ritual of getting in front of the mirror to with my shirt off to become podcast John. That is actually you hit that right on the head, Summer, when you were saying that. I don't know how you know that, but that's what happens. So if you
Just
all want to
figured.
take a moment to picture me before the podcast in the mirror with my shirt off, and I look great.
Does that
I'm not
involve
gonna show you.
flexing and posing as well, or
Oh yeah.
no, of
Yeah,
course?
all of it. Yeah, and a little bit of like kissing of the bicep. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but modern rituals, right? Uh but no,
Whatever gets you going, man.
right,
Yeah.
right, right.
We'll withhold judgment,
Right. Thank you. But I love that. And that kind of ties in, I think, like to this idea that we were discussing earlier, Summer, before Philip joined us, we were talking about sometimes like I go to 12-step meetings to maintain recovery because ex drug addict, current drug addict, whatever your language is. I used to use drugs, don't know more. But so I go to these meetings to kind of to help with that. And sometimes the meeting is maybe I don't love it or it is burdensome. There's it's like life, it's transient. But sometimes it's like this magical experience. So it's like I guess when you were talking, Philip, that made me think about when you're talking about the exercise routine, and Summer when you're talking about making your own rituals. Like I have made my own ritual. I mean, it's somebody else's program, but I have made my own ritual of like going to these meetings to maintain this recovery. Um, and like having the ritual, it's almost like with the follow your bliss idea, like it's almost like a way to keep that in balance to where I'm not following my bliss to the, to Mexico and like, cocaine or whatever it is. I'm following my bliss to like I found this ritual that works in this way. And it doesn't always do the thing that I need it to do, but overall, it kind of does. It at the end, like when I don't go to the meeting, I feel it. I go to one a week. If I don't go, I'm a little more negative. Even if the meeting would have sucked, it's weird. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah, I think that's really great. I do want to talk about the hero's journey and the modern relevance. Um, but before we jump into that, we've touched on it a little bit already. But I read this book, Infinite Jest. I've talked about it on here a little bit before. But one of the main ideas was that the reason why there's so much suffering in American culture is the loss of ritual. And it sounded like you were saying that earlier too, Summer, with Joseph Campbell saying that our modern culture has kind of lost it. So Hero's Journey has many rituals in it. How can we take this maybe oversimplified thing and apply it to our life in a way that takes us through some rituals? How do we find ritual? I know that's a lot of shit I just threw at you guys, but riff on it.
Well, a lot of it is through story. And I think we are the storytelling creature for a reason because our stories confer patterns on what could feel like a very chaotic existence. It give us a reason for why we suffer and why we triumph and show us that there are ways to connect through story. So stories connect us and give us a sense of connection and meaning in the world. They can do that anyway. They can also be a way of exploring the disconnection and alienation and all of that. But yeah, for me personally, even as a writer, I took a lot of influence from Campbell's formulation of the hero's journey. And obviously, I didn't stick the journey in front of me and say, okay, now I have to do this, now I have to do that. But in broad terms, I wrote a trilogy, the Edan trilogy. The first book is the departure in many ways. If you're going to, I think you can boil down the Campbellian hero's journey into three stages. One is the departure, and where the protagonist has to leave that comfort zone, leave that womb-like space, and be pushed out into the world, whether willingly or not. And then there's the second phase, which is, I think, transcendence, where the hero transcends the ego, transcends the self. It becomes something bigger and more significant. And then, of course, is the return. And my third book is actually called Return to Edan for a reason. I mean, I'm consciously and in fact, I think that's something that we don't do a lot. If there's one part of the hero's journey that gets neglected a lot in modern fantasy, it's the return. The hero saves the day and the big battle's over and everything's great. Well, that's you're on part two. We need part three. Where's the return? What happens after the hero gives everything to save the day? What's the what role does that hero now have in the world? And so that's I thought that that was something I could do in my own writing and enacting that as a reader, as a writer, is a way for us to feel meaning and as we recognize the patterns that we establish in these stories, that they give us the opportunity to feel like it's not all chaos and meaninglessness. And whether you believe that we're tapping into a kind of meaning and pattern that transcends us, that is before us, or whether you believe that we are simply, as individuals, crafting a sense of meaning, I think it can be empowering either way. In other words, the latter might be a kind of existentialism, right? Where you're saying there's no really any intrinsic meaning to the universe, but I can carve out a sense of meaning by being in the world, by strapping on my sword and putting on my boots and going out into the world and doing my best and making relationships that matter and help me get through these things. So all of that, I think, has it can be empowering. So
Mm-hmm.
John, it looks frozen to me. So I'll let you go ahead, Summer.
Oh, yep, he looks frozen to me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said about we're kind of sometimes miss part three of the hero's journey. Um,
Yeah.
I That resonates with me because I think what's the difference? Oh, well, he'll come back.
You're the host.
I guess I'm the host. Um,
And it's still
wonder
recording.
if,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, we'll just keep going. Hopefully he'll
He'll
join us
return.
again.
Speaking of the
Um,
return, yeah.
exactly. He's doing this. This is podcast John's little funny, bit here where
He's
he's now going to
probably
return.
flexing in front of the mirror right
He
now.
is. He
Yeah.
is. He had a lull, so he's gonna get himself hyped back up. Um, but yeah, no, it's interesting to think about what's the difference between just an adventure and a hero's journey. And I think you're right that it's that third, it's the return with the boon that one gained during the journey. So it's the return with something gained that then the hero shares with
Yes.
society and family.
Yes.
So that's the difference between any adventure and the hero's journey. And I think you're spot on that sometimes that's what we miss is that return and that integration of what was learned. So that individuation, that process of integrating all the parts of the self. And that's what kind of completes the hero's journey. Otherwise, it's just an adventure with some, maybe some fun, memorable characters along the way. But it's the return with treasure that one shares with the community at large and oneself is what makes it a hero. Otherwise, it's just a journey. So, um, the hero's journey's gotten a lot of criticism as well for being too simplistic and all of that. But I think it does serve its purpose of letting us know, Campbell says what we have to follow the hero's thread. And I'm paraphrasing, we end up at the center of our own existence. That's why we read these things. It's because we see ourselves as the hero. And again, it's that mind shift that makes life it makes life the poem that we're living. It makes it we're alive. I love that there's a Harvard professor, Ellen Langer, and she writes books on mindfulness, but she says nothing about Joseph Campbell, and yet in my mind they say the exact same thing. She just says it with science and experiments. She does all of these different experiments. Essentially, her experiments come back to this fact that when you are mindful, not in kind of the yogic term, but she calls it like an active curiosity. When you're actively curious about your life is kind of when you're functioning as your highest self. And I think that's what Joseph Campbell, that's everything he basically says is see yourself as the hero. You are the hero of your journey. And the goal is to come back with treasure that you have found yourself. The responsibility is on ourselves to find that treasure in the whale's belly or wherever, and then to share that with the people around us and share it with ourselves. So I think that's, we're the heroes in waiting. And I think that's what, Philip, before you joined, I was telling John, he's at that midlife phase where, James Hollis and Campbell and all these others say that is sort of the beginning of the process in a lot of ways. So it's kind of the hero's journey. If you haven't taken it by now, you're bound to take it soon. But you got to come back and share what you've learned and integrate it. And then that's what makes it mythic and serves a collective purpose. And when we all do that, imagine, kind of the collective boon that happens as a result.
Yeah, so I'm the hero, obviously, and you guys are like the wizards.
I'll take that. I've been called worse archetypes than the wizard. I'll
Hopefully that
gladly
doesn't
take
mean
that.
we're gonna die soon, though.
Well, I guess it could. I guess it could.
Well, we're in the third act of the podcast, so you guys are still alive.
Right.
It looks like you survive. Well, the last thing that I want to kind of talk about, and then I think we'll kind of head out here. This has been fantastic, by the way. I feel like my head's exploding with good stuff. Just this idea that everything is divine. And in the Power of Myth, he's talking about how um, Native Americans, Indians called things thou.
Mm.
I'm not sure if it was a specific tribe. I'm completely botching like all the the quotes here, but he said something about how like start referring to things as a thou and watch how it changes your psychology. And I thought that was really powerful because thou is holy object, I think was the meaning. I might be wrong. You
Mhm.
guys, if you know, please tell me. But yeah, just that idea of like looking at even the worst things. There's another thing in there where Joseph Campbell's talking to a guru, and the guru said, "Oh yeah, Joseph Campbell, this is perfect." He said, "If everything is divine, then how do we say no to the worst things?" And then the guru said, "For you and me, we must say yes." And I just thought that was amazing. So, if you
Mhm.
guys could offer your thoughts on that before we close, that'd be cool.
Sure. Yeah. In terms of other cultures, there are many that share this concept of the divine permeating existence. And that in that sense, we are all one in the divine that is within us. And literally in South Asia, when you say namaste to someone, you are saying, I salute the God in you, right? And that is a concept that is very easy for people, I think, who grow up Hindu or Buddhist to grasp, to recognize that there's a reverence for life in that, that the divine is in everything. And I am in you, and you are in me, and we are in everything, you know. So I think that that's something that Campbell certainly, I think it became central to his thinking, really. And he wrote a lot about Eastern philosophies, and I think they influenced his thinking about myth in general in significant ways. So when he talks about transcendence as that middle part of the story, and then the return that Summer was just talking about, these are very Eastern concepts in a sense, too, I think. The idea of
Mhm.
transcending the self, recognizing that the temporariness of the ego, but also simultaneously the eternal nature of one's life force because it is part of everything, right? And then divine is in everything. So that's something that I think is it's a concept that we who grew up with more monotheistic faiths may feel is more of a leap, let's say, or it may feel threatening even in a sense, because I think a lot of times we have this idea that, oh, well, I'm going to live forever because I'm going to go to heaven and my little ego is going to continue as is. And we find the idea of being absorbed into the greater universe, into some sense of the communal divine to be frightening, right?
Yeah.
And there is a frightening aspect to it, perhaps, I guess. It's a dual thing. There is a sense of absolute bliss and sublimity in joining the eternal, but also if you're holding on to that ego and you want to, I want to be forever, it's about me, 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 then it can be terrifying at the same time. So I think that there is great peace in seeing oneself as part of everything. That's how I have experienced that concept in my life, and I can see where it would be threatening to some people, but I found it very liberating. I found it to be the most significant and real way that I think of my own mortality with a sense of peace, rather than feeling terrified to die. I feel like, yeah, my life has meaning because I'm part of everything, and the ripples that I leave behind me are going to affect other people, and we're all connected in that way, right? Like there's a book that I read that I love and I've quoted many times. It's by Thich Nhat Hanh called The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, and he compares us to a wave on the surface of the ocean. Each person is a wave. We're a happy little wave, and we think we're separate from the rest, right? But really, that wave is part of all that water, and it always has been. and that wave will disappear and go back into the water. But it's I think that's a beautiful metaphor
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
for all of that. But that's my take anyway.
Yeah, that is a beautiful metaphor. Um, yeah, so yeah, Campbell says, the world without spirit is a wasteland. And that was probably one of the quotes that just I have always thought about over and over. Um, I can't assign what someone else's spirit might look like or behave like, but it's when we feel that it's a wasteland that bad things happen, right? And I always think about, whether it's sitting down to write or it's, some kind of addictive ritual. I think those are always moments of us trying to connect with the sacred, and the sacred doesn't show up in those moments. It's like you made a meeting with God, and so you're taking a drink or what, and God doesn't show up. And so then you drink more because God didn't show up. So I love that. For me, Campbell puts the responsibility back on me. I can find spirit. My life is a wasteland unless I find spirit, unless I am on my hero's journey, unless I see myself as a hero, unless I'm seeing other people as thou, respecting their journeys, whatever that is. But I think, perhaps every generation has said, this is the moment when we need this idea the most. And so I will echo that and say that I do think this is the moment when the wave metaphor is perhaps the one that I just wish we could kind of download to everyone's brain. Um, because I do think we're so connected artificially, but do we have the spirit? In the same way that a ritual is just action unless there's intention. So when we make it too simplistic and take away our own creative power, then these things are empty. And I think that spirit is the same way. I could go to church all day. I could, become an ordained pre whatever. But if my spirit isn't there, if my active curiosity isn't there, it's just human behavior. And I don't think that's what Joseph Campbell, I loved anytime he talked about what's behind language. I always thought that was really exciting when he would kind of take etymology and throw it out the window and try and talk about what is sacred. Language is profane, and yet we use it to talk about what is sacred. That always just made me so excited because, I remember as a child, I had a neighbor who was, Christian. Her family lived there. And then they moved, and a Jewish family moved in. And I didn't understand all of the specifics of these religions. I just really understood these are different people. And I knew that. And I didn't know why I knew that. I don't know what, I just knew these are different kinds of families. And, I got to a point where I thought, are they all, they're embodied spirit. They're, finding joy in their lives. They're adding meaning. How different are they really? They just go to a different kind of building and they use different kinds of words, but aren't they all kind of talking about the same bliss? And I got a lot of criticism for that growing up, that was somehow, against religion. And I always saw it as above religion. And that I think that's really what we can bring to our own lives is sometimes we have to acknowledge that we are kind of boxed in by language in a lot of ways. I mean, it is our connective tool, but it's the things that we don't have words for that are the things that are most worth talking about. So what a good reminder. We're just humans, like our brains can understand more than we can articulate, but even that we don't understand at all. And that's why I love the wave metaphor. Anything that helps humans understand that we're all the same, in so many ways. It's all the same. It doesn't matter the religions, what you read, what you write, whatever it is. We're all that living, breathing spirit, hopefully, that is making good use out of this one beautiful life to bring in Mary Oliver, who I didn't know it was going to come to this podcast, but it's that same idea. I mean,
Hello, Mary.
her poems all talk about that. It's look at your life as a divine experience. Like it is divine, and it's myth making, and it's poetry at its finest, and make it that way. And you can't make it that way if you're mindless. You have to be the hero. You have to, respond to the call. And the call is to make your life meaningful so that when you are at that point that Philip discussed and you're at the end of it, your ego is not fighting against it because you're just amazed at all that you were able to truly experience, even the hell that you did experience. It was, you were alive while doing it. And I just think that's probably, for me personally, the most beautiful thing I've taken from Joseph Campbell is that idea that I have ownership. Divine does happen on earth, but it's up to me to see it, look for it, practice it, create space for it. That is not on anyone else to do for me. And that's why we are all the archetypes. We have to be our own mentors. We're our own tricksters. How many times do we do things that harm ourselves, or these self-fulfilling prophecies and things? So having just a recognition, just slightly hovering above an idea enough to have objectivity, I think is the difference between a miserable life and a masterful life. And we, who knew we could do it through myth, which is essentially storytelling. Of course we all knew because we play with words all day, but I mean, that's how you get there. It's through the sharing of stories. And even though we're limited in our capacity and our human language, it's the sharing of experiences, whether at, AA meetings or podcasts or just a passive reading experience. It's the sharing of those stories that make us know and feel that we are part of the ocean and not the water in the bucket.
Mm.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What I love about, I feel like the tricksters at play when I start the podcast, like the trickster's trying to like figure out a way. The trickster's like, okay, how do I not edit any videos and just like post rambling sessions and like get it to somehow feed my writing career,
Right.
that's the trickster, right? And then I get into the podcast and I'm like, all right, this is what I'm here for. Thanks, trickster. And then like it's just like and it ends up becoming this like intense spiritual experience, which is the reason, I actually do the podcast is for that, but the
Right.
trickster like gets me there. Anyway, you guys, seriously, like that was just amazing. And this is, you truly have made me feel, again, both of you, every time I talk to you, like I am following my bliss in this. And so I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you coming on talking about Joseph Campbell. And now you guys can essentially die because the hero has learned his lesson. I'll cry. I'll have the Frodo moment where, feel up in
Just
summer.
don't eat us, John. That's all I ask for. Just
No,
don't eat us.
no eating. No,
But
I
if you
will.
do eat us, do it mindfully.
Right. No, I'll just pretend you guys are bread from now
All
on.
right.
All the bread.
Instead of that, you could read Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. And
Mm.
remember us that way.
Okay.
You should read
Yeah.
Mary Oliver's Wild Geese before you do your podcast, even. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I prefer that.
Yeah.
I need to stop eating
Yeah.
so much bread anyway. Uh, well, guys, you have a lovely day. And
Thank
that's
you.
all, folks.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.